Ah, what a great day to be on the internet. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, the flying spaghetti monster has had his daily offerings, and, hold on. Who is this, and why does she look like Tanjiro from Demon Slayer? Buckle up, people of YouTube, a very peculiar specimen has hit the internet. What kind of specimen, you might ask? Well, just look at this. If your first thought is, man, she looks a lot like Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I honestly don't blame you. But hold your horses, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Enigma of Sépia is a mobile RPG developed by Unicorn Whale Technology Limited that promises an epic worldview and one-of-a-kind gameplay that allows you to level up your characters to higher rarities. I think. The game launched on February 14th, 2025, and even before its release, it was already making waves in the depths of Twitter and YouTube. When the game's trailer was uploaded a month prior on January 13th, it became a bit of a talking point. Normally, a game might garner hype in the weeks leading up to release for things like gameplay, visuals, character design, and more, but Enigma of Sépia seemed to be garnering hype for all the wrong reasons. Not the AI voiceover, lamau! The choice to put a watermark to deter YouTubers from making videos about your game was a weird choice. Yeah, gotta say, the only interesting thing about this game will be the court battle that follows. So, does anyone want to bet how long this game would have before being taken down? Bro, there's no shot this survives. This is funny on so many levels because they barely hide the fact that they just copy-pasted the characters as females just to avoid lawsuits. Now do it with Pokemon characters and see how Nintendo reacts, that could be fun. This sentiment only seemed to get bolstered 2 weeks later when the game's Twitter account made a post revealing a playable character named Denise, which went on to become one of its most viral posts. People in the comments were quick to point out that Denise looks a lot like Denji from Chainsaw Man. From the chainsaw hands to the messy blonde hair and... is that Bochita? Anyway, you've probably gotten a feel for what we're getting into with this video. Enigma of Sépia's shtick seems to be their eagerness to market the lookalikes of the most well-known characters in shonen manga. But having looked at the characters for a while and having seen other people talk about them, it seems more like the developers are copying the homework a little too much. I've heard some people say this game is a parody, but regardless of how you slice the cake, that doesn't steer us away from what is inarguably the elephant in the room. Is any of this even legal? Apparently, and according to several sources, it's a little more complicated than it would be at a first glance, but I'll get to that later in the video. The legal complications aren't the only things I want to talk about, though. I also want to talk about the other characters in the game and their sources of inspiration, I guess you could say, because being someone who is passionate about character designs, I certainly had a field day with this one. But before I continue yapping, let's get to the video itself. If you're new here and you want to see me tackle this interesting predicament, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, then welcome back to the Spaghetti Layer. Either way, strap your butts in, because here we go! Oh boy, where do I even start? I guess we should start with the characters and who they drew quote-unquote influence from first, so we can understand just what about this game got people talking. I will disclaim that I've only consumed a few of the titles and franchises that Enigma of Sépia takes influence from. A lot of the other titles just aren't up my alley. Sorry. However, I am familiar with almost all of the titles in question, and I will handle this to the best of my ability. Hopefully better than the last time I talked about a game's character designs when the Genshin Wuthering Waves discourse was making their rounds last year. Well, putting aside the fact that that video is now 10 months old, and quite a few of my opinions have changed since then. Changli, come on! I currently have no plans to touch the game itself, because I'm not sure if I want to give this game more traction outside of this awareness video. And I've heard it's pay to win anyway. So I'm going off of other videos I've seen talking about the game, as well as news articles and other internet sources. Of course, more power to you if for whatever reason you choose to check the game out, but just be aware of what you're getting into. Also, I highly doubt I can show the entire illustrations for most of these characters without risking demonetization, so I will either be using the safer work versions that I found on the internet, or be getting a bit creative with the censorship. Don't shoot the messenger, folks, that's just the way YouTube works, unfortunately. And in the interest of time, I won't be talking about absolutely every character, because there are a lot. So I'll be talking about the ones that stuck out to me the most, and the ones that I think might have been better if the inspiration wasn't so blatant. So let's get to the root of the apparent issue here. A lot of the characters from Enigma of Sépia's lineup appear to be heavily influenced from the most popular manga and anime of the last 40-ish years. From Naruto to Hunter x Hunter to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure to even Dragon Ball. And a majority of the designs have been taken from manga that were at some point serialized in the manga anthology magazine Weekly Shonen Jump. Never mind the fact that Enigma of Sépia has an all-female cast and the characters they're referencing are all male. According to the voiceover in EOS's announcement trailer, which I'm almost positive is AI, the playable cast consists of characters from different worlds who have united to stop Sépia, who was originally the goddess of beauty before being exiled after a failed attempt to overthrow the Divine Court. Now, the different worlds thing could probably justify a few things on paper, but the glaring issues that everyone who has talked about the game brought up still remains. Some of the character designs aren't quite as obvious as the others as to who they're based off of, but in a vast majority of the cases it's pretty clear who is supposed to be who. The game's starter characters, or so I've heard, are among the most obvious ones. Little Sai is supposed to be based on Goku from Dragon Ball, as evidenced by her similar spiky hairstyle, the orange and blue uniform, and the shoes. She even has a patch on one side of her gi that matches the patch that Goku himself has. At a glance, the kanji on Little Sai's patch appears to be different from the one on Goku's patch, but the similarities still remain. Nova, who is based on Luffy from One Piece, has the same straw hat as the character she's based on, and she also has the same red vest and shorts, although her shorts and vest are way shorter than Luffy's are. You may have also noticed the skull on her thigh garter, which in a way harkens back to the skull on the One Piece logo. The third starter character, Little Razi, wait, Razi like Rasengan? Has spiky blonde hair and a bright orange and blue jacket just like the titular character of Naruto. And that's not including the headband and the marks on her face that Naruto also has. Sylphira, who was the first character to be revealed on the game's Twitter account, and who is, I guess you could say, EOS's counterpart to Sasuke from Naruto, is slightly more subtle at a glance because of the hairstyle, and also the footwear and the way she wears her shirt. But her shirt still looks a lot like Sasuke's, aside from the blue cloth around her waist and the purple rope belt. Also, is that the Sharingan? Cronus, who is based on Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, also takes many design elements from her counterpart, from the hat to the long jacket to the belts. She even has that large chain on the collar of her jacket. But I think when it comes to Cronus specifically, the biggest offender is that the design of the being behind her in her splash art is a straight lift from Jotaro's stand Star Platinum. The same goes for Carmilla, who looks suspiciously like Dio, who is also from JoJo. If her companion looks familiar, that's because it's also a direct lift of Dio's stand The World. And that's not getting into how much of Carmilla's design is taken from Dio himself. Both characters share the heart motifs, the headband, the golden boots, the black bodysuit, and much more. Lena Frost, aka Ichigo from Bleach, has a hairstyle and hair color similar to her counterpart, and she has a similar sword as well. The black cloth around her waist and the white sash are also reminiscent of Ichigo's Shinigami/Soul Reaper uniform. Other characters whose designs aren't quite as blatant as the previous examples, but still pretty obvious, in my opinion anyway, include Alicia, whose outfit is substantially different from the titular character from Boruto, at least at a glance. But note the headband, the color scheme, and the word Boruto on her shirt in her in-game model. Nora Zorana, I see what you did there, has a different outfit than Zoro from One Piece, but she still has the triple swords, the 3 gold earrings in her left ear, the black bandana around her arm, and the bright green hair. Well, I would say Zoro's hair is more of a mint green, but still. Eranor's hair color and hairstyle are different from that of Eren, the main character of Attack on Titan, but her outfit bears a lot of similarities to Eren's uniform. Still, though, her design isn't quite as egregious as Levia, who is based on Levi, also from Attack on Titan. Characters like Royale and Bipolaris, yes, that is her name, might have gone under the radar if Bipolaris didn't have the same face mask as Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul, and Royale's uniform wasn't the same color as Roy Mustang from Fullmetal Alchemist. Yukari's design might have passed as being substantially different if she didn't have facial markings similar to Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, who also inspired Sanguina. Now, I haven't watched Jujutsu Kaisen yet, but I can only imagine how powerful this man's aura must be for there to be 2 characters based on him. The same can apply to Naldra, aka Natsu from Fairy Tail, whose shorts, footwear, tailcoat, and hairstyle differ from her counterpart in some capacity, as well as Cheshire, aka Killua from Hunter x Hunter. Her shorts, sweater, and shoes are different from Killua's, and I will confess I would have missed the reference if not for the word Hunter on her bodysuit. I will also admit that I had to look up who Celestis was based off of, and as it turns out, she's based on Seiya from Cautious Hero. While some elements of the outfit are different, fan service anyone? The color scheme and the general vibe is the same. Lastly, I want to talk about the two that, as a Demon Slayer fan, made my soul leave my body. While Eliza Thorne's design isn't as egregious as a lot of the other characters, her socks, color scheme, and the lightning marks on her sword and the soles of her shoes are indicators that she is the counterpart of Zenitsu. On the other hand, it's pretty easy to tell who Aquasera is based on. After all, she has Tanjiro's hair and eye color, the green and black checkered patterns on her outfit, and the plushie hanging from her belt looks almost exactly like Nezuko, even though her shoes and hairstyle are both different. Even Sépia herself isn't safe, as her weapon looks a lot like the Lance of Longinus from Evangelion. No, we are not talking about Ivy Lynn. If you think the similarities stop at just the character designs, you'd be wrong, unfortunately. If you go to the game's website, you'll see that most of the characters have introductory backstories that seem suspiciously like their counterparts. Lyra was born without any distinct personality traits, but wanted to be a hero and got her wish after inheriting special powers, much akin to Deku from My Hero Academia, who goes through the same circumstances. Sylvia is a gifted high school student who vowed to eradicate evil with the help of, quote-unquote, the Book of Life and Death, even though her notebook straight up says Death Note in-game, another nod to Light, the main character of Death Note. Yurina swallowed the finger of the Queen of Curses, not so different from Yuji from Jujutsu Kaisen if I recall correctly. Now, the game could probably sweep under the radar on this front by merit of the vague wording, but my point still stands. And this brings me to the big issue here. Which layer of the law cake does this fall into? As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, some people have called Enigma of Sépia a parody, which I suppose would justify why the game's characters look the way they do if that actually was the case. But I'll get to that in a minute. According to Merriam-Webster, parody as a noun can either mean a literary or musical work in which the style of an author or work is closely imitated for comic effect or in ridicule, or a feeble or ridiculous imitation. Personally, if we're going to call it a parody, I wouldn't call Enigma of Sépia a close imitation for comedic purposes, so much as I would call it a close imitation for fan service purposes, if the design choices and splash art for a lot of the characters are anything to go by. I mean, just look at Giselle and Morgana. Plagiarism, on the other hand, is defined as the act of stealing and passing off the ideas or words of another as one's own, using another person's production without crediting the source, or, in the intransitive sense, presenting a product derived from an existing source as a new and original idea. And again, looking at the character designs in EOS, it's easy to see why so many people were quick to throw plagiarism accusations in the game's direction. In some cases, as a few people on the internet have pointed out, parody can be used as a defense against trademark infringement claims. At least in the US. But Unicorn Whale Technology Limited is based in Hong Kong, and almost all of the franchises that Enigma of Sépia draws its references from were created in Japan. In fact, the only exception to this trend that I can think of is Overwatch, where one of the playable characters, Genji, appears to have heavily influenced the design for EOS's character Ayame. So, before I go over the parody versus plagiarism debate in more depth, I think it's worth going over copyright laws in Japan, China, and Hong Kong first to figure out if any IP holders of the original characters can hit EOS's developers with some flavor of a lawsuit. While Hong Kong is officially a special administrative region of China, and there are some overlaps in the copyright department with China, Chinese national law doesn't typically apply to Hong Kong. In this case, it's treated as a separate jurisdiction and has a separate intellectual property regime for mainland China. So that is why I want to go over copyright laws there too. I'm not a lawyer though, so as I said earlier, I am going to handle this to the best of my ability. According to an article from the international law firm Harris Slowosky? Help me. According to this article, copyrights arise in China as soon as an original work is created, regardless of whether or not that work was created in China. For example, if you write a book in the middle of Antarctica, that book will automatically have copyright protection in China, and you don't need to register your copyrights in China for them to be protected in that country. And it's a similar case for Hong Kong, which has broad copyright protection thanks to its open qualification system, meaning that no requirements of nationality or other status of the author or their work's first place of publication need to be satisfied before a work is eligible for protection. Some of the things that can be registered for a copyright in China and Hong Kong include movies, written works, and art. Although people are saying that the splash art in Enigma of Sépia is AI generated, which, if true, leads to another can of worms entirely. But to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised. They most likely used AI for the voiceover in the trailer, and just look at Alicia's hand here. However, if someone in China were to steal your work, enforcing your copyright claims against that person/entity would be a lot easier if you have a registered China copyright versus if you don't. For Hong Kong specifically, in order to successfully file for copyright protection, the subject matter must be a work that falls into any of the 9 categories covered by Hong Kong's copyright laws. And the work must be original if the subject matter is a literary, dramatic, musical, or artistic work. In mainland China, you would have to register copyrights with the Copyright Protection Center of China. The price you would have to pay for doing so depends on what kind of registration you're seeking. Japan has strict copyright laws which consist of 2 parts, author's rights and neighboring rights, and copyright is considered a collective term as opposed to a single concept. Japanese copyright law protects all works in which thoughts and sentiments are expressed in a creative way, and all works that fall within the literary, scientific, artistic, or musical domain. These laws automatically provide a set of rights without the need for formal declaration or registration. As a part of the author's rights, the author can also control the reproduction of a work, how a work can be transmitted or distributed, and how their work is adapted, whether that's through translation or cinematization. Neighboring rights pertain to the rights of those who play an important role in communicating creative works to the public, like performers and broadcasters. I also want to touch on IP, or intellectual property enforcement, as it applies to the World Intellectual Property Organization, which Japan and China, and many other countries, are both part of. Intellectual property enforcement refers to taking legal action when IP rights like trademarks and copyrights have been infringed. According to the WIPO's website, merely obtaining IP rights is not a guarantee that your works won't be infringed. Enforcement of these rights is crucial for the success of creators, innovators, and entrepreneurs. Trademark infringement occurs when there is a quote-unquote unauthorized use of a registered trademark or similar sign to identify identical or similar products and services as those covered by the registered trademark that lead to likelihood of confusion among consumers about the origin of the goods and services that are identified by these signs. The WIPO also defines copyright infringement as the acts of use, reproduction, distribution, adaptation, performance, or display of a copyrighted work without the consent of the copyright holder or the related rights holder. This brings me back to the parody defense that several people have brought up regarding Enigma of Sépia. If this matter originated in the US, the parody defense would probably apply. But neither Japan nor China have explicit provisions for parodies, and Hong Kong doesn't have an explicit parody defense to copyright infringement. Some exceptions can apply under the right circumstances in Japan, but in China, creating a parody would be a legally risky undertaking. And that in turn brings me to the plagiarism side of things. If you're taking inspiration from an existing character and making that character your own, then again it's almost impossible not to. There are multiple substantial changes that you have to make before that character can be considered original, like changes in hairstyle or color scheme. I've heard that you need to make at least 5 of these substantial changes, but I swear I've also heard someone say that you need to make 11 changes. Or maybe my memory is being spotty on that one, who knows. Of course, I can't personally condone what EOS's developers are doing on account of how shameless a lot of these designs are in the copying department, and also the AI. But if the developers had gone the subtle route with every character as opposed to a few, then chances are we'd be having an entirely different conversation on the game. Maybe they could have changed the design of Eliza's sword in-game so it isn't a direct lift from Zenitsu's sword, and also swapped the triangle patterns on her socks for a different kind of pattern. Or maybe they could have changed the design of Bipolaris' face mask. I am still not over the fact they named her that. What a choice. Maybe they could have given Nova a pirate hat and a matching coat, or changed the clouds on Eclipsia's coat thingy so that they don't look so much like the ones on the robe that Itachi from Naruto wears. Or maybe they could have given their upcoming character Ravenshade a hairstyle that's different from Aki from Chainsaw Man, and an outfit that doesn't look so much like that of Evelyn from Zenless Zone Zero. Well, okay, Ravenshade's outfit isn't one-to-one with Evelyn's, but it's a little too close for comfort. And while the developers changed Pochita's color in Denise's splash art and Denise's hairstyle and outfit, the chainsaw snout is still there, as are the chainsaws sprouting from Denise's arms, so I doubt that this could qualify as a substantial change. However, there's still one more question that needs to be asked here. Would any of the current copyright holders behind the infringed works go out of their way to sue EOS's developers or otherwise pursue some form of legal action? As much as I, and I'm sure many others, would like to see at least some accountability here, honestly, who knows? Unicorn Whale Technology Limited is apparently a startup and EOS is their first game, and again they're not based in Japan where almost all of the creative works they referenced originate from. So I imagine that the IP holders would have to navigate international law, and that's assuming they would want to file lawsuits against what appears to be such a small company. We also have to take into account whether or not they have registered copyrights in China and or Hong Kong. This is certainly not the first time that a creative work has ripped off of another existing franchise, and unfortunately I doubt it'll be the last. Realms of Pixel, another game that came under scrutiny for reasons similar to Enigma of Sépia, has one character that looks a lot like Nappa from Dragon Ball. Never mind the fact that the game's art style looks exactly like that of Dragon Ball. To my knowledge, however, Realms of Pixel hasn't faced any legal repercussions as of yet. In 2023, the NFT project Oldius came under fire for copying a cutscene that appears in Arknights, specifically the one that plays right before the boss battle in Episode 8, Roaring Flare. Oh look, an NFT project copying creative works. Who's surprised? Nobody. Hypergriff, the copyright owner and developer of Arknights, and Yostar, the company behind the game's overseas distribution, put out a cease and desist notice shortly thereafter, and the offending video was taken down as a result. Nintendo has become pretty notorious for cracking down on copyright infringement, and in 2024, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company filed a lawsuit against the game Palworld, a game that hilariously earned the nickname Pokemon with Guns due to its gameplay. The game's developer Pocket Pair was also sued for infringement of patent rights. Several months earlier, the Pokemon Company issued a statement saying that it intended to investigate any acts that infringe upon the intellectual property rights related to the Pokemon franchise. Pocket Pair, Nintendo, and the Pokemon Company are all based in Japan, which I believe was a contributing factor as to how easy and fast it was for the latter two companies to file a lawsuit in the first place. Then again, Nintendo has garnered a reputation for cracking down on anyone and everyone who shows even a millisecond of footage of the games that are licensed under them, and the lawsuits haven't stopped Palworld from becoming one of the best-selling PC games. I have to stop to appreciate the blatantness of this whole thing, but I also have to ask, why? EOS's developers have not made any announcements or acknowledgements regarding a partnership or collaboration with Shueisha, the company behind Weekly Shonen Jump, or Fate Grand Order, which was another of the affected titles that Enigma of Sépia copied from. So why would they do something like this if there is a non-zero possibility that they could land in hot water if they continue down this route? And even though there's nothing inherently wrong with taking inspiration from characters you might like, how much is too much here? Of course, Enigma of Sépia is a pretty new game as of writing the script, and it may be some time before any repercussions happen if they do at all. But I would also personally encourage the developers to make more substantial changes to their character designs going forward, while still paying a subtle homage to their influences if that is indeed what they wish to do. Because in terms of publicity and possibly law, I don't see this sort of thing ending well otherwise. Though, to be honest, and having taken everything into consideration, only time will tell where this whole thing goes. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. If you like this video and you want to see more from me, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and tune in every other Friday for art-related videos and other quality shenanigans. If you want to support me further, please check out my other social media accounts as well as my Ko-fi and my Etsy shop, which are all in the description. And lastly, if you made it this far, leave a mirror emoji in the comments section below. And let me know what your thoughts are on this whole situation, because oh boy, this was a doozy. And as usual, remember to keep things civil in the comments, or I will put a whoopee cushion in your chair when you least expect it. And yeah, that's about everything. Thanks for watching.